The Bills have lost notable players this offseason as Josh Allen's contract just gets more costly. Can the Bills continue to infuse this roster with talent while being bound by the money that they owe their star quarterback? Let's go ahead and discuss. What's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series as we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And Bills fans, I got Bills Mafia, I got your beloved Buffalo Bills. But of course, before we talk about how they may do in 2024, let's go ahead and reflect on that 2023 season. The Bills began the season in a shocking manner, losing to the Zach Wilson-led New York Jets in overtime. That's right, Zach Wilson. It was a rough way to start the season, but the Bills took that embarrassment and they took it out on their next three teams, the Raiders, Commanders, and Dolphins, as they outscored them 123-43. They would then have one of the most uneven stretches of football the entire season, as they would lose to the Jags in London and then barely beat the Tyrod Taylor-led New York Giants. They lost to a struggling Patriots team, and then they almost lost to the Bucks on a failed Hail Mary that could have been honestly called for defensive pass interference, but nobody calls defensive pass interference on Hail Marys. They then would lose to the Bengals, and then they would pull defeat out of the jaws of victory against the Broncos, as Denver would miss the game-winning kick, only to get a second chance because of a 12th man on the field penalty. After getting payback versus the Jets, the Bills would lose a close game versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and they headed into their bye week 6-6. Things weren't looking promising. The playoffs were starting to look dim, but I wouldn't count this team out, and I say that as a Dolphins fan. I mean, just look back at what I said in my Power Rankings video coming out of their bye week. Right in front of them, I got the Buffalo Bills. I know right now they're on the outside looking in, but there's so much talent on this squad. I'm not willing to bet against them. I'm not going to bet against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. I just won't do that. I think they could sneak in, especially with all the injuries at quarterback that have happened. I mean, look at this. Look at the other playoff contenders here. Kenny Pickett gone down. Anthony Richardson went down. Gardner Minshew, though, capable. They're down. The Browns are down to Joe Flacco. Is Russ cooking? He was for a little bit, and then he wasn't. So, I'm not going to bet against the Buffalo Bills. And I was right not to bet against them, as they would close the season on a 5-game winning streak to win the AFC East and secure the number 2 seed with wins against the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins. Buffalo would face the Steelers in the wildcard round, but it was moved from Sunday to Monday because of a dangerous snowstorm that hit the Buffalo area. It wouldn't matter much, as the Bills would win and move on to the divisional round, where they faced the dreaded Kansas City Chiefs, but they got the game in Buffalo. Unfortunately, Tyler Bass's game-tying field goal attempt would go wide right, and they would lose 27-24. The Bills were a great team when it came to EPA, but some of this was inflated. They had one of the easiest schedules in the league, and they also had some really dominant victories where they moved the ball exceptionally well. However, there were times prior to their bye week where they struggled to score when in scoring position. It wasn't until they flipped from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady as offensive coordinator that this team actually got its act together. This isn't to disparage the Bills, but to give a little added context to why this team was just so much better down the stretch. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. Josh Allen's now headed into the more expensive part of his contract, which means the Bills had to find a way to get cheaper, which means shedding contracts and letting players walk. And that was definitely a case, as we saw On offense, wide receiver Gabe Davis, and we saw Mitch Morris, the center. Those guys ended up leaving. But defensively is probably where they took the biggest blow. As you saw notable vets like safeties Micah Hyde and Jordan Porter. You saw corner Trey White. Those guys leave. You also had edge Leonard Floyd, linebacker Tyrell Dodson, cornerback Dane Jackson. They ended up not being brought back. So they ended up losing a lot, but I think they did a really good job of bringing in talent. So let's go ahead and get to some of their additions. Shoot, I didn't even talk about their biggest loss, which came via a trade as they traded Stephon Diggs, their wide receiver one, to the Houston Texans, and it made sense. It really did. For one, Diggs wasn't really happy there. He was very passive-aggressive the last couple of years, especially down the stretch when it came to his involvement with the offense and his production. He's also getting older, and you're trying to get off on some of these bigger contracts. He was a contract you probably wanted to shed. And to be fair, I think the Bills did a good job of at least easing losing a player the caliber of Diggs, as they added Curtis Samuel, who a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, he's a slot player. He's a slot player. That's where he's the most effective. But is that a role that's going to be that was more Khalil Shakir last season? But I think they could use him and Samuel pretty interchangeably, that they could work them both outside and inside. If you remember, Samuel started his career with the Panthers, where early on he played a majority of his snaps out wide, but he's someone that's going to get very involved in the RPO game. You could use him as a jet sweep option. You could get real fun with him. They also added Matt Collins, who's radically different than what they have in that wide receiver room. He's bigger, he's more physical, he's going to be a very good run blocker for this squad, and we'll eventually get to what they did in the draft, because they address, again, the wide receiver position with their first pick being in the second round since they traded down. But again, we'll talk about that when we talk about the draft. But this team really focused on retaining some of their talent, at least for the intermediate future, as they extended like Deion Dawkins. They brought back like a David Edwards, who's probably going to end up being your starter at left guard, but showed to be a really good like swing tackle option last season. You also have like AJ Epinesa, Cam Lewis, Teron Johnson, who's one of the better slots in the NFL. Quinnen Morris, who low-key probably one of the better tight end threes in the NFL. But let's look at some of the other guys that they also added. I also believe that they did bring back Daquan Jones, who, like, when healthy, has been really solid for the squad. It's just he has been a bit banged up last couple of years. But they added, what do we got here? Nicholas Morrow, who's going to be a backup player. He's going to be a backup linebacker, which is fine. Like Matt Milano, he was banged up last season. You lost Tyrell Dodson in free agency. So adding a little bit more linebacker depth makes a ton of sense. And I think Morrow's probably at best a backup level player. You also went out and snagged Mitch Trubisky to be the backup quarterback. And I know Josh Allen was a little banged up, but he played through it last season. No backup quarterback took, or at least attempted, a pass attempt. But Mitch Trubisky, familiar with the team. He was just with this squad, like, 2 years ago? So he's here as the backup quarterback. That's fine. They also brought back Taylor Rapp, who, I mean, you just lost Poyer and Hyde, who were very long tenure players here for the Bills and very productive. So you need that production at safety. And Taylor Rapp, is, I think, a very solid option, but I think he's more of a box option, as they don't mention it here on ESPN, but they went out and got Mike Edwards, who is kind of this boom or bust. Like, he can make plays. He's got those like ball skills. He's kind of a ball hawk, but at the same time, sometimes he'll blow a coverage. But I like that addition to kind of mitigate what you lost. And again, those more veteran, older players in Poyer and Hyde, who are still playing at a relatively high level. And then again, we'll get to what they did in the draft because this was also a position that they touched up on. But is there anyone else that they may have added? We'll clap. He's going to be a backup center as Connor McGovern's going to get moved to center there. You got Casey Tuhill, who is going to be part of that rotation at edge. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about what they did via the draft. And I really like what the Bills did here with their draft, as they moved back multiple times in the first round, at the back end of the first round there, and ultimately ended up moving into the second round, having that first pick in the second round. They take Keon Coleman, who again is a bit radically different than what they currently have at the wide receiver position, being more of this big bodied. He does have some speed to him, but kind of struggled with separation, and he's not exactly like the most fluid player when it comes to what he does as a route runner, but a guy that was very dominant at the contested catch, can create a little bit after the catch just because of, well, he's tough to bring down. So I like that addition to Coleman to the wide receiver room. And then with pick 60, they go with Cole Bishop, that safety position. And this one's fascinating because I do think Cole Bishop was probably better suited as kind of this box safety and maybe feels a bit similar to Taylor Rapp. But I mean, this is a team that plays a lot of quarters, and when they're not playing quarters, they're playing man. So I think if anything, you're gonna protect them in quarters by having them not having to cover a lot of area. And if anything, he's gonna be coming downhill, and that's where he makes his plays on the football, coming downhill, jumping routes underneath, but also in man coverage where like you're going to stick them to a tight end or a running back out of the backfield. So I don't know if Cole Bishop's going to start relatively early. Maybe they're going to roll with the veterans, the guys that are with just to have a little bit more experience. But I could definitely see at some point this season Cole Bishop started. And then they add some more interior depth with Dwayne Carter. I like him as a penetrator. He's got really good bull rush, good first step. And I had him in this range anyway, where it was like back into the third, early fourth. So I thought that was a solid pickup, especially with the injuries you had on the interior, trying to find that other guy that could play next to Ed Oliver. And then in round 4, they get Ray Davis, getting a more bruising type of back, as they did lose Latavius Murray, who's huge, but he was more of their physical runner, someone that can that was a good change of pace when it came to what James Cook brought to the table. Ray Davis kind of does that, as he's kind of got this bowling ball size. He can eat hits, but like low key, pretty good in the receiving game as well. Like Ray Davis, really solid pickup there. In the 5th round, kind of a steal, as Cedric Van Pran, Ranger, ends up getting selected. I had more of a like 3rd or 4th round grade on him. He ends up going in the 5th as someone who's probably gonna be your hopefully your long-term solution at the center position, as he was someone that I just wasn't like wowed by at Georgia, but always did a stellar job, never came off the field. I think 2 years in a row he led the Georgia Bulldog offense in snaps, or at least percentage of snaps on the field, and was always really solid. I loved their other 5th round pick here in Edifon Ilofosho, linebacker out of Washington. They do have a couple of other linebackers there, as I mean, of course you're going to be fighting with like Matt Milano, who, hey, he's great. You're not going to get to start over him. But then like you got Bernard, who's played really good football. So is there a way for Edifon to get on the field? Because they also drafted Dorian Williams last season out of Tulane, who has better size, better length, probably actually similar in athleticism. But I would say Edifon's a bit more well put together in terms of his game. I don't know, it's fascinating, but I do like them just taking a player that I had in my top 100. Like, hey, the value was there. Take a shot on it. I like it. Javon Solomon was their last pick in the 5th round. A bit shorter, but really good length. If anything, he's kind of a designated pass rush only option. They're coming out of Troy. And then in the 6th round, they grabbed Tyler Grabble out of Central Florida. Actually, I think he was a former quarterback coming out of high school. A bit of a developmental project at tackle. Good length, good traits. Probably someone who's going to be on the practice squad relatively early on. Then you got Daquan Hardy, who I actually really like as a potential slot player, but he's not going to be playing slot anytime soon as long as Johnson is healthy. But good player nonetheless. With their last pick, they grabbed Travis Clayton out of the International Player Pathway Program. Couldn't tell you much about him outside of his testing numbers. He's someone that's probably going to be on the active roster just because I think guys from the International Pathway Program don't count against your final 53. So you could hold him on the roster without it taking up one of those spots and not have to worry about them getting swiped from the practice squad. So he's here as a developmental prospect. But like all in all, I liked their draft. Like I would say their first 4 picks aren't necessarily that sexy, but you hit positions you needed to with wide receiver. Coleman was a good pickup. Bishop, good pickup as well. You hit, again, 2 positions that kind of got barren this offseason with Diggs, Gabe Davis, gone. With Poyer, Hyde, gone. And then you just grab more interior depth. You grab someone in the backfield there that could maybe help when it comes to James Cook, because he's probably not a volume player. Though when I talk about the offense, I got an opinion when it comes to James Cook. I think he's going to have a big year. But then you also snag some guys that were falling in Edifon, in Solomon, in Cedric Van Pran. So really good draft here by the Bills. Let's go ahead, talk about this coaching staff. When it comes to this coaching staff, Sean McDermott has done a hell of a job under his tenure of keeping this team competitive, and I think Leslie Frazier definitely deserves a lot of credit with that. He was the DC. Then he also took on an assistant head coaching role with this squad. And I mean, he was so well respected by this team that when he stepped down from the squad, they didn't have a DC this past season. It was vacant. It was Sean McDermott doing his best. And now, obviously, Bobby Babich, he steps up into that role. But this is Sean McDermott's defense. He's going to be calling the shots for the most part. He's done a really good job at that. When it comes to what to expect defensively, this is a 4-3 defense that will run a good mixture of stunts and blitzes. And you're going to see them blitz actually a bit more on first down. And it's a quarter-heavy coverage scheme, but they like to hit you with the man defense relatively early. They really do. And when they do, they're going to be sending in some extra pressure, trying to set up longer second down and potentially longer third down situations. Just basically putting the defense in a more favorable position. And again, I just want to echo how good of a job McDermott did with this defense last season, as they dealt with a lot of injuries. You had Von Miller coming off the ACL injury, and then he comes back and is not that effective. Gregor Rousseau was dealing with I believe it was a foot injury. Daquan Jones, the pectoral that cost him most of the season. Ed Oliver was dealing with the toe injury. Jordan Phillips, wrist injury. Matt Milano had the knee injury that made him miss the rest of the season. Kyrie Elam had an ankle injury. You had Trey White early on missing the season with the ACL. Dane Jackson had a foot injury. Christian Benford dealt with not just a shoulder injury, but a hamstring injury for most of the season. And then Poyer and Hyde really just having to gut it out as they both dealt with their own injuries respectively, but played a large majority of the season, didn't really miss time or miss a beat. So McDermott having to deal with a lot of injuries on this defense, and being able to really just kind of show the depth of the squad and just how good the coaching staff is when guys having to be called upon, step up, and do well in their roles. And I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the positional coaches when it comes to this coaching staff, but I think that this coaching staff did a great job. They've never really been that good when defending the run. Like, they were 22nd this season. They're typically a bottom middle of the group when it comes to their run defense, but from a pass coverage perspective, they're really, really good. That's why my pass coverage grade, my pass defense grade is so high for McDermott. And you got Bobby Babich, who's now stepping up to be the official DC after that position was vacant last season. He was the linebackers coach. He's been with McDermott since McDermott was hired. Prior to that, he was the defensive backs coach at Eastern Illinois, Florida International. He was with the Browns. He was with the Panthers as a defensive assistant. So he's going to get a bit more of a step up in responsibilities, but for the most part, I think this is McDermott's defense. He's doing a lot of the play calling. Now, let's talk about the offense, because this team was radically different, at least in terms of how efficient they were with Joe Brady compared to Ken Dorsey. When it came to what they were doing, it wasn't radically that different. It was very much West Coast. It was very much RPO heavy. But in terms of just how efficient Joe Brady was compared to Ken Dorsey, how more reliant on the run game Joe Brady was compared to Ken Dorsey. Like, James Cook broke out at the back end of the season and was very, very successful. And I mean, what we saw with Joe Brady is we saw a hell lot more motion, pre-snap motion. You did have a lot of those RPO looks, and for the most part, it was a very big, quick game, short to intermediate passing, and Josh Allen taking less YOLO shots. I mean, there was still that, but definitely the turnover-worthy plays for Josh Allen were less apparent down the stretch. You did have them in instances, maybe in more competitive games, like with the Dolphins. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays. He had another one with the Kansas City game where that was a freaking bar fight. That game there in the divisional round, he ended up having 2 turnover-worthy plays. But I mean, you could kind of live with it. And this is kind of already talking about the offense, talking about Josh Allen. You could live with the turnover-worthy plays just because of the big-time throws. Like 42 last season, including the playoffs, huge number. Like, yeah, he might throw the ball to the defense every now and then. He might have those arm punts, but you'll make up for it just with his ability to move this offense and what he can do even on like 3rd and long situations. Like, this is why Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But again, that's going into now the offense. But Joe Brady, I'm excited. Like, he kind of got a raw shake of things in his stint as the Panthers OC with Matt Rule. Unfortunately, kind of got thrown under the bus. Like, we all remember him for that magical LSU national championship winning season where he got a lot of credit. He was a hot name, jumps to the NFL, gets thrown into OC role maybe before he was ready. But I thought what we saw last season from him, where he didn't really radically change Ken Dorsey's offense, but he was way more efficient with it. The play calling was better. The use of motion was better. Just how efficient, the more reliance on the run game and taking the wear and tear off of Josh Allen was just better. Let's talk about some of the other coaches on this staff. Let's jump over here. Let's scroll down. As you got Scott Booker as the nickel defensive backs coach, senior defensive coordinator. Kind of like that role. I mean, you got Taron Johnson, who's one of, like, I'd argue he's a top 10 slot corner. Yeah, he's a top 10 slot corner in the NFL. Scott Booker there as just a specialist. As we've seen, like, pass rush specialists, he's here as a slot corner specialist. This is a team that spends a lot of time in their sub package, their nickel formations. Then you have Ronald Curry as the quarterbacks coach. Oh man, again, I love former players who just take up coach roles. I believe he was with the Saints last year as a QB's coach. But I think he's been coaching for a while, about at least 8 seasons, maybe even 10 at this point. But he actually he grew up in my neck of the woods. He was formerly, I believe he was formerly Hampton High School quarterback before he went to North Carolina. But always cool, especially when they're like guys from like my neck of the woods where I grew up. I always find that very fun and fascinating. You got Al Holcomb as the linebackers coach. I believe he joined the squad in 2023. So you could give him a little bit of credit for the development of guys like Bernard and Dodson. We'll see how he does with guys like Ilafosho or Dorian Williams. But this was someone who was a linebackers coach with the Panthers and helped develop Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis. And then the offensive line coach, Aaron Cromer, has been here since I think 2002, at least 2001, or maybe 2001 or 2002. Regardless, he has done a great job at developing offensive line talent. I was out on Spencer Brown at the beginning of last season, and Spencer Brown literally turned his game around. It was like, whoa, there we go. That's what we wanted to see. That was the potential. That was the ceiling. I honestly was like, no, this is a guy that you're not going to bring back. He's going to hit free agency. No, you kind of now need to re-sign him. He is the future there at right tackle. Like, Cromer deserves a lot of credit. I imagine the same is going to happen with Osiris Torrance there at guard. We also have Kyle Schumer. That name should sound familiar because this is Pat Schumer's son. He's a quality control coach here for the squad. But let's go ahead. Let's talk offense. Let's talk the roster. As per usual, you'll see my grades for each position group over here. I talked a little bit already about Josh Allen, and honestly, if you don't think he's an elite quarterback in the NFL, I don't know what to tell you. Like, at his size, his athletic ability, his big arm, he is just a freak. He's an alien. He is a true specimen. I get it. The turnovers, there's a ton. Not all of them are his fault, but he is known as the YOLO ball, the arm punt guy. But he makes up for it with his big play ability, his ability to attack deep, his ability to be a threat with his feet. He had 15 rushing touchdowns last season. He had 44 total touchdowns last season, not including the playoffs. His ability, even in third and long, to be a dangerous threat. He is just he's built different. I don't want to say this as a Dolphins fan. It puts a bad taste in my mouth. I hate it. But those are just the facts. Like, I'd argue he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. And I think you can make a fair argument for maybe some other players. But I just don't think they offered the same sort of upside and big play potential. I just think maybe they're a little bit more reeled back when it comes to the turnovers. So I think you can make an argument, but to say he's not elite, I think it's just disingenuous. When it comes to the running game, James Cook, I thought he maybe not necessarily analytically did better during the flip with Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady, but the usage went up. His ability as a pass catcher was definitely put on display. Maybe the yards after contact weren't necessarily better, but his ability to actually hit the second level got better. I think the blocking in general just got better. The use of motion helped him get to that second level and just eat and rip off some gains. I just thought was overall better for this squad. And I truly believe James Cook is in line for a big year fantasy-wise. I would be willing to take this cat at the back end of the first round in fantasy drafts. Like, we're talking like 12-team leagues. And like, because if guys like Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor off the board, I would seriously consider James Cook. I would. And those guys should be off the board by the back end of that first round. I don't know what his current ADP is. I don't typically do my fantasy drafts until like the week before the season opener. So I don't know what his current ADP is. Maybe it's like back into the second, maybe it's early third, so maybe you could get him later for a better value. But I'm just telling you what I think his potential is in this offense, because I think he's going to eat. He's going to get a ton of touches. Let's quickly go over the depth of the running back room, because it might not be like great or fantastic, but I think it's fine. You had Latavius Murray as the second option here, and now you lose that. And I really do think Ray Davis is going to be the replacement of that volume rather than Ty Johnson. I mean, James Cook's going to eat. Josh Allen's going to run, but that third person I do think is going to be Ray Davis, because he's got a bit more of a bowling ball build, so it's not the physical behemoth that Murray was, but he does bring that ability between the tackles, the ability to eat contact, but also he has some of that receiving upside, which Murray did as well. So that's why I think Davis probably edges out Johnson in terms of utilization, but Johnson's a good committee back. Behind them, you got Frank Gore Jr., the son of Frank Gore, a bit undersized. He's got moderate quicks and long speed, but his ability just to eat contact at that size and just what he can do as a pass catcher probably makes him make the roster, at least over Darrington Evans, who's just kind of a camp body at this point. Gotta give a little shout out to Reggie Gillum, who really helps out with the blocking here. He played 100 snaps as a fullback. It's kind of a dying, if not dead, position in the NFL. Few teams actually utilize a fullback, but the ones that do, they typically try to get those guys on the field. And I mean, you got to give a little props here to Gilliam, because I would say he's one of the better run blocking fullbacks in the NFL. He was really able to help get James Cook to that second level unscathed, untouched, to really get those chunk gains. But let's go over the pass catchers, which I am down on, at least in comparison to the NFL or the rest of the NFL, the rest of the league. Because keep in mind, Keon Coleman, he's a rookie. We kind of already talked about what to expect with him. And honestly, I do think he's going to do exceptionally well in this offense. I don't think you need him to be a great route runner. I think he can be this one-cut guy, this prototypical X who wins at the catch point and be all right, especially in this more short to intermediate blocking scheme. But he can go and win vertically and be that jump ball guy. I think that's A-okay. And then Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, it's kind of tough to say who's going to be the leader in the slot there. I think it could go either way. Again, Curtis Samuel had a lot more experience outside early in his career. Khalil Shakir, in terms of his utilization, was more used down the stretches. He had like big games. He had that one in the season finale against the Dolphins where he went off for 105 yards. He had like 10 receptions in the 2 playoff games, 2 touchdowns. He had that crazy touchdown where he just kept breaking tackles against the Steelers. But for me, it's a real coin toss. I think both players probably are at their peak as slot players, but I think it's a real coin toss who's going to play more in the slot, more outside. You also got to keep in mind Dalton Kincaid's also going to be eaten in the slot. Coming into the league out of Utah, it kind of felt like he was more of a jumbo receiver. He actually played receiver at San Diego before transferring to Utah, and Utah likes to use multiple tight ends and their tight ends in the slots. That's what they did with Kincaid and Brent Kuthi. But Kincaid, very smooth route runner, very good ball skills. He is going to be lined up in the slot there quite a bit. He was there, I think I already said 60% of the time last season. So, I mean, who ends up being the lead snap getter on the outside opposite of Coleman is anyone's guess, because you can make an argument let's talk about some of the other depth here. For Matt Collins, because he's a really good run blocker, very physical type, but I feel like you're going to want a little bit more speed and just flex, like hip flexibility, just smoothness, and that's just not Holland's game. That's more in the wheelhouse of Samuel and Shakir. You also have Justin Shorter, who you're kind of hoping, who I would say is a bit better of an athlete than Hollins, but kind of injuries the last couple of years. He coming out of Florida, he was more of a developmental guy. You have MVS, who honestly doesn't really matter until the playoffs. He's known for not doing much during the regular season, even having heartbreaking drops during the regular season, and then just kind of popping off in the playoffs. So he's probably just here to do that. What is he? He is a taller vertical threat. That's kind of what he is, and he probably sticks to the roster because of that. I think the guys behind him don't really have a chance to make the roster. KJ Hamler, someone who is more of a vertical slot during his time with Denver. I can't remember specifically what the injuries were, but it kind of cost him just his time to develop and his time to get on the field there in Denver. You have Chase Claypool, who showed something early on in his career with Pittsburgh, but I don't know if it was hubris, but just couldn't put it all together. A guy who was just built different and just kind of has fizzled out in the NFL and probably will be playing in Canada. Andy Isabella just kind of bouncing roster to roster at this point. He's more of just a camp body. Couldn't really tell you much about some of the other guys behind him, like Byron Thompson, Tyrell Shavers. Lawrence Key, I do know, came out of Tulane, undersized, more of a slot player. Probably a long shot to make the roster. Xavier Johnson, I feel like, is the Ohio State receiver that really just never saw the field. So all those guys, long shots to make the roster. They're more camp bodies. Let's talk about tight end while we're here, because don't forget about Dawson Knox. He's still gonna eat in this offense, so to speak. And by eat, I don't mean necessarily like receiving production, but like just being productive in general. Like, he's going to be a really good blocker. He's going to be someone that's going to be just a good security blanket for Josh Allen, and someone who, like, low-key, sneakily really good downfield. Like, he might run the basic tight end route tree, but you get him on a crosser downfield, Allen's going to throw it up, and Dawson can make that catch. So probably one of the best tight end duos, I guess, in the NFL. I also mentioned Quinton Morris. I really liked him coming out of Bowling Green. Never really had his time to shine. He had a little spurt last season when Dawson Knox went down to injury and performed decently well. I can't remember the game specifically. I want to say it was the Giants, but I'm not positive. I don't want you to quote me on that, so let's just go ahead and look it up. As it was, I guess it was technically the Giants because he had the touchdown, but that is where he, that was his second game with the most snaps. He also had a game against Philly where he played a lot of snaps, but I really like him, man, and he's just never really had a chance to shine just because he's, stuck behind Dawson and now stuck behind both Dawson and Kincaid. They also have Trey McKitty, more of a blocking tight end. He was drafted, I think, in the 3rd round by the Chargers a few years ago. Just a blocker. You also have Zach Davidson, more of a developmental guy when he was coming out of, I think it was Central Missouri. Can't remember off the top of my head, but it was pretty funny. I do remember that he wasn't just the tight end for his school, but he was also the punter. So I don't know, maybe he sticks to a roster because what he could do as a backup punter. But let's talk about the offensive line, as Deion Dawkins just been he's not like a top 10 tackle in the NFL, but he's just exceptionally solid. I think you got to include him as like a top 15, top 20 tackle. If we're talking about like both right and left tackle, he has just been consistent. He's just like set it and forget it, never have to worry about him. You also have next to him is going to be David Edwards. At least I assume it's going to be David Edwards. He was really just I would say like a swing tackle, sixth offensive lineman last season. Someone who I think it was initially with the Rams. Initially with the Rams, and was actually fairly solid in 2020 and 2021 playing left guard. So like, don't sleep on him. Like, just don't. He did have a brief stint in 2022, I think before injury, just where he wasn't effective, but be on the lookout for him, man. Maybe he ends up having a big year. The Bills decided to bring him back for a reason. At center, you're going to be moving Connor McGovern from that left guard spot to center. He's a relatively okay player. He does have snaps in the past at center in Dallas, though he's primarily played guard his whole career. He's more of a pass protector than he is a run blocker. I don't know if that gets mitigated much at center, but he's here. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because like Connor McGovern is a young guy. Like, I think he turns 27 this year. I don't want to say he's not the long-term option. You got to imagine you're hoping Cedric Van Pran is, but at the same time, Cedric Van Pran was only a 5th rounder. So there's not like a big investment in him, but he's going to be replacing Mitch Morris. That's kind of a big deal. I would say Mitch Morris was probably their 3rd best offensive player behind Deion Dawkins and probably Spencer Brown, which we'll get to in a second. Osiris Torrance had basically what you would expect from a rookie season. I expect the play to be much better this year. Again, have a lot of faith in Cromer as a developer of offensive line talent. Just looking at what he did with Spencer Brown, who literally had a career year. Was it perfect as a pass protector? Not necessarily. There were a lot of penalties, but I think he did a solid enough job, especially with a quarterback like Josh Allen, who might stumble his way into pressure. I thought he did a really, really, really good job, and better than he has the last 2 years. Like, this is someone, especially if he rinses and repeats what he did last season, that you have to sign back. Just a really good job. Let's talk about the depth along the offensive line. As I kind of mentioned Cedric Van Pran as potential heir apparent, but you do have Will Clapp, as he can really play guard or center if injury does occur. But I imagine if things go a little shady or don't go well at center, or they have to move some guys along the line, it'll probably be Clapp that steps up at center rather than Cedric Van Pran. But maybe they give the rookie a go because, again, very solid at center over the course of his career at Georgia. You do have Leo Collins, who probably is the next guy in at tackle. They list him here as a left guard, but I mean, Leo Collins played tackle largely his whole career. And I get it, injuries have kind of limited him over the last couple of seasons, whether that was with the Cowboys or with the Bengals last season. But he is the next best player up. The other guys you have here they just aren't. You can't rely on them because they have like no snaps to their name. Like, you look at Tylen Gramble, he's largely, I think, a developmental player right now. You have Ryan Van Denmark, who I liked coming out of UConn, but only has 46 snaps to his name, or at least that's what it was last season. So it's got to be Collins. That's got to be the next guy up. When it comes to guard, I do think it's going to be Clapp. Alec Anderson, another guy who just doesn't have a lot of snaps to his name. I can't imagine them starting someone just that's doesn't have a lot of experience in the NFL as of yet. Some of the other guys, Richard Gorej was coming out of Florida. Didn't love him. I thought maybe at best he's a mid-tier backup. Kevin Jarvis, I believe, was Tennessee. I'm not positive on that. But another guy who was like potential, Michigan State. But another guy who's probably a mid-level backup at best. Gunnar Britton, be fair, has experience at tackle. But again, kind of a long shot to make the roster. Mike Edwards, I believe, what small college was he out of? Campbell. He's largely a developmental player. Keaton Bills is interesting. I believe he's going to be a 26-year-old rookie coming out of Utah there because he had the mission trip. But had a lot of intriguing tools. So could make the roster, not out of the realm of possibility. But for the most part, like the depth behind your starters isn't like wowing. That's why my offensive line grades aren't like spectacular for this crew. And again, it's in comparison to the rest of the league, so they're just a little further down by comparison to other NFL teams. But let's go ahead. Let's talk this defense. Starting with the defensive line. As you can see, I got my defensive grades here for both run defense and pass rush. And then we'll get to coverage when it comes to this defense. But golly gee willikers, I kind of expect their best pass rusher here to, I was going to say be Gregory Rousseau, but golly did Ed Oliver does a very great job as a pass rusher. If you want to go look at his pass rush win rate last season, which I'm going to do actually right now. You had Ed Oliver with a 13.3%, very moderate, good grade for an interior player. But Gregory Rousseau, he's your lead edge rusher, 16% pass rush win rate. Kind of just gotta get the guy on the field more, you know. And I get it. He had a bit of a foot injury, but he didn't miss time. Like, he maybe missed a game here and there, but get him on the field. I get they want a deep rotation, but he's your best pass rusher. 62 pressures, 7 sacks last season, including the postseason. Very solid, very good. Get him more involved. You're hoping Daquan Jones could be healthy. Look at the past couple of seasons for him. He got banged up late in 2022, but was very productive. 33 pressures, 5 sacks. Last season, ended up getting hurt in week 5. But up until then, he had 3 sacks. He had stinking, 11, 12, 15 pressures. Utterly ludicrous. He led the team in pass rush win rate up until that point with 17.9%. And like, the dude's an old head. I get it, but golly, hopefully he can stay healthy because he's hella good on the field. And I guess you're kind of hoping maybe you could keep him fresh and keep him healthy, keep him durable by having a good rotation there. As we'll talk about some of the rotation pieces they have there on the interior. I have AJ Epinesa as the starter there. Von Miller, I just feel like at this juncture is just kind of a DPR player. Just wasn't that good. I get he was coming off the ACL, but he just wasn't that good of a player for the Bills. Like, played in 14 games last season, 17 pressures, no sacks. Like, dude, Von Miller, hell of a career, but he's 35 years old. Use him as a DPR option. Epinesa is going to be, I think, the guy that, well, because they don't have a Leonard. The thing is, they don't have a Leonard Floyd here, so it's like Epinesa, I think, is going to get a big increase in snaps. He had a 33 pressures, 7 sacks last year. His win rate wasn't great, 8.2%. But again, get him on the field more, see what he can do. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the depth of this squad when it comes to the defensive line. As again, let's talk about the rotation. They bring in Austin Johnson, solid pickup. They draft Dwayne Carter. I think he's going to be involved too. You're gonna be able to keep guys like Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, relatively fresh. But I mean, hey, dude, Ed Oliver played over 800 snaps last season, 72 pressures, 11 sacks, ludicrous number. But you are kind of hoping maybe to get a bit better in the run stuffing department. But that also should get better with the healthy Matt Milano. That really just should. It's just unfortunate that he ends up going down early to injury, like 5 games into the season. Really, really unfortunate. Some of the other guys that they have on the interior here, like Deshaun Williams, could end up making the roster. Not familiar with Eli Inco. Couldn't really tell you much about him. Not really familiar with Branson Dean. Gabriel Stevenson. I don't know what they're going to do with him. But if you're not familiar with him, former collegiate wrestler, was in WWE's developmental program, where he did appear on NXT a few times, ended up not working out there. Now he's here in the NFL, but like, he's got to be raw as hell. So like, he ain't seeing the field. He's probably a practice squad player, really. So it's like, yeah, this is your rotation here. This is your rotation. When it comes to the edge group, like, Smoot's fine, but he's at that tail end of his career where even now he's kind of a mid to low tier rotation edge player. Maybe you hope Javon Solomon could come in and be a really good designated pass rush only. But Casey Toohill, like, if you're not confident with Solomon in that role, Casey Toohill can do that as well. They have a couple of guys here who, Rondell Bothroyd, I believe he was out of Oklahoma, tested relatively all right, but didn't see a lot of playing time. You got David Ogawogabu, I believe he was the Houston edge rusher, played off-ball linebacker for Oklahoma before moving back to the edge for Houston. He was largely kind of like someone that maybe you can develop into a rotation piece somewhere down the line. These are guys that probably maybe make the practice squad. At least one of them should. Not too familiar with Cameron Klein or Kingsley Jonathan. But you are kind of worried about the rotation because, like, I think Gregory Rousseau can take that next jump. I'm not that confident in AJ Epinesa. When it comes to the linebacker room, I like Terrell Bernard, man. Very, very solid run stuffer. Hits like a brick as well at his size, 6'1", 224. And should be, honestly, a really solid partner in crime, I suppose, to Matt Milano, like, scary pass rushing threat. Like, as a blitzer, like, the dude gets freaking after it. Like, unfortunately this year, again, injuries, but you want to look at 2022 on 73 pass rushing snaps, 24 pressures, 5 sacks. 2021 on 96 pass rushing snaps, 3 sacks, 16 pressures. Like, he's someone you want to get involved as a pass rusher. He truly is. They will be developing some guys behind Bernard and Milano. They do bring in Morrow as more as a backup option, but again, he's nothing too crazy. Oh, Deion Jones is on this roster. I didn't notice that. That's kind of cool. Deion Jones, I mean, unfortunately with him injuries, but had a good early career there with the Falcons. But Dorian Williams was someone I really liked out of Tulane and was kind of betting on just his athletic ability, his length, his just true nose for the football. And then Edifon Ilofosho tested out way better as an athlete than I thought he would. Someone who knows how to get nimble between the tackles and actually plays really well in zone, kind of tailor-made for a quarters heavy scheme. So those are two guys that I'm like, wait, is this the future at linebacker? I think at the very least one of those guys are. The question is, because let's be fair, Matt Milano coming off a knee injury, he will turn 30 at some point this season. So it's fair to say for a team that needs to get cheaper in the future, it might be something in the cards there. Braylon Spector, I think, in my opinion, is just a special teams player, but that's fine. You need players like that. Joe Anderson, that's an interesting way to spell. And Anderson, that's just wild. Out of Buffalo, couldn't tell you much about him as a UDFA. I don't think I went over him this past draft season. Same with Shane Simon. But let's talk about this coverage unit, the secondary. As I'm higher on what this team can do from a pass coverage standpoint. And to be fair, I think what brings the grade down is the safeties. So, because I absolutely love Rasul Douglas, and Christian Benford was mamma mia. Kind of just had his coming out party this past season. Looked hella good. And it's wild that they hit on a 6th rounder. And it's funny when he came out, I actually liked, I think his name was Denzel Williams, his teammate, his opposite of him at corner. Like, I looked at both of them and I was like, okay, like Benford is kind of like more of this like bigger, like freakish size at 6'1", 205. That's just big for a corner, and maybe someone you can develop. And I looked at Williams like, oh, I think he could eat in the slot. I don't know if Williams is even still in the NFL or if he's bouncing around. But yeah, Benford ends up hitting big like last season. His completion rate, it was pretty high, but had 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. It was kind of more of this bend don't break, which when you hear quarters heavy coverage, you're typically, it's more of a bend don't break type of defense. Across from him is Rasul Douglas, one of my favorite corners in the NFL, just because I feel like he just flies under the radar. He's kind of been really good everywhere he's been. Like, let's take a gander. As he started his career at Philadelphia, where he was relatively solid. Like, didn't play like a ton of snaps. Like, played 600 in 2018, 500. Ends up going to Carolina, where he plays 800 snaps and was all right. Like, again, not like crazy like it was the year before in Philly, but it was fine. And he goes to Green Bay and he's like, yeah, this guy's sick as hell, man. And they just end up trading him, and honestly for a good cost, like picking up a 3rd rounder. I can't remember what the specific trade. It may have been like a pick swap with him thrown in, but he was really good for Buffalo last season once they acquired him after there at week 8 or at the trade deadline. So love that. And then again, Taron Johnson, maybe one of the more underrated, like probably like definitely a top 10 slot corner. I'd have to go back and like kind of look where he ranks among the top slot corners in the NFL, because quite frankly, he might be a top 5. Like, maybe I'm just being a little bit ignorant here and I just can't remember offhand, because like you got guys like Michael Carter, like I'll say it, like Devon Witherspoon is kind of a stud. You have Kenny Moore, who's still really good against the run, but kind of got eaten up a little bit against the pass, so he's kind of on his way out. So I'd have to go back and look at it, but like Johnson's great. I don't know what more you want me to say about it. Allowed your typical 65 to 75% completion rate again in the slot. You're just going to allow a higher completion rate. That's just what happens. But for pass breakups, the yards after the catch were relatively fine. Again, just a really good player in the secondary here. Before we like jump into the safeties, let's just talk about the actual the rest of these corners here. As you got Khair Elam, I've heard different fans have told me like either they're completely out on him or they haven't given up hope. They're still developing him, but I mean, at this point, what, 2022, 2023, 2024, you'll have one more year after this year. He might end up being a trade target at the deadline. And like, I know he was banged up with the ankle injury last year. But I mean, I don't know. Like, unless Benford or Douglas get hurt, I don't know what really to expect. Like, I don't know how he's going to shine, you know? So, at this point, might be just good depth, man. Because he was a first-round player, man. The pedigree's there. So, maybe there's still a good player there. Maybe. Jamarcus Ingram? I ain't gonna lie to y'all, or Ingram. I couldn't tell you much about this guy. Basically, I could tell you nothing about this cat. So, like, I don't really know what to say when it comes to him. If he ends up being your, like, corner 4, corner 5. But Cam Lewis is here. I think Cam Lewis has inside and outside flexibility. There are a couple of interesting names there when it comes to the depth, like Kenny H. Lovely out of, I think it was Western Michigan. It was Western Michigan. I really liked him at the Tropical Bowl. If you go back and look at some of his analytics, he was pretty darn good for the Broncos, allowing a 50% completion percentage. He had 4 pass breakups, 6 forced incompletions. The missed tackle rate was relatively solid. Like, did a really good job. And what he like brings to the table, like just kind of a smooth athlete, someone who I think is definitely better in quarters and a more zone heavy scheme. I do feel like he kind of got in and up a little bit in man coverage here and there, but did show ball skills during his career there with the Broncos as a starter. So I was like, okay, let's go. I talked a little bit about Daquan Hardy, more of this undersized slot player that's got really good speed. Technically, D. Delaney, they list him here as a safety. He was someone that was playing slot, supposed to be playing slot for the Bucks last season. So I don't know if they're listing him as safety. I feel like that he's kind of a long shot there. The safety group is pretty interesting. As you can see, the starters I have there for the squad are Mike Edwards. I'm gonna lean on the veteran. They also chose to bring back Taylor Rapp. I keep saying Tyler. What the heck, man? I do that with every Taylor. Like with Taylor Heineke, I constantly called him Tyler Heineke last year. My bad. But Taylor Rapp, more of a box player, more of a hard-hitting guy, while Mike Edwards kind of likes playing deep. So like you get real creative and have Rapp ease into creep up into the box, and maybe in your quarters coverage, you replace that with your slot player, or you replace that with linebacker potentially, or if you get a third safety on the field. But yeah, Mike Edwards has that ball hawk in him. But the interesting name to bring up is it's Cole Bishop. I kind of talked about a little bit. I think Taylor Rapp is more of the role that Bishop would play in this defense. So if he's going to usurp somebody, I feel like it's going to be Rapp. But maybe I'm just undermining, because like Cole tested out as a solid athlete. I just kind of struggle with his range, but you could typically hide range in that split high quarters coverage. You could hide a lack of range there. It's not like they're playing cover 3 or single high and whatnot. So yeah, maybe I'm just being a little bit ignorant of that, but it's going to be fascinating to see. You got Damar Hamlin, who's here, who didn't see a lot of snaps last year, played a little bit on special teams, but it'll be interesting. I imagine he will be their safety 4, But maybe the one guy I think can maybe usurp him is Kendall Williamson here, who was coming out of Stanford. As I think that was in 2023 he came out. Yeah, because he was originally with Chicago and tested out really well. Kind of a bigger player that can really move. So I'm kind of fascinated if maybe he can challenge Hamlin for the safety 4 position. But all in all, man, I think the defense is solid. I think the secondary group is gonna do extremely well. I am curious about how this team will defend the run and pass rush. Outside of Ed Oliver, can Russo take that next step? And will he be given the snaps to take that next step? Because it's not exactly like they got the depth that they had last year. Von Miller, he's old. Can he succeed in a DPR role and be productive? If not, maybe we see like Javon Solomon step up in that regard. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting, but let's go ahead. Let's get to my prediction for them in 2024. The Bills last season had the 6th easiest schedule in the NFL, and that's going to radically change in 2024 as I have them with the 11th most difficult schedule in the NFL. But let's go ahead. Let's project what this team's ceiling can be in 2024. As you open the year with the Cardinals, that should be a win. That should be a win. I don't think that Cardinals team is there yet, especially defensively. This Dolphins game, listen, I get it. Tua's like 1-4, 1-5 against the Bills. I get it. But you remember the last time y'all faced us early in the year in Hard Rock. Y'all were sweating through the unis. I know y'all almost won that game, but let's say that y'all split with the Dolphins. I think y'all could beat the Jags. Ravens and Texans on the road, kind of a toss-up for me. I think realistically, you at least lose one of these games. So let's say you beat the Texans because, well, DeMeco Ryans is going into year 2 as the head coach. And I mean, as much as last year was promising, I think it's fair to say there will still be some lumps and bumps in year 2. But I think for the most part, they're going to be a really good team. We're going to say you split with the Jets. Keep in mind, you lost to Zach Wilson in the season opener last year. Let's have you beating the Titans, the Seahawks. You beat the Dolphins at home. I'm going to say y'all beat the Colts and you beat the Chiefs. You get the Chiefs in Buffalo. You get to take revenge and avenge that loss in the divisional round. Yeah, let's say y'all win. And then you get the Niners coming out of your bye. That's a little difficult, but you also get that at home. Let's say this is a sneaky dub. And then you get the Rams and the Lions on the road. Lions are coming off a mini bye. So let's say you beat the Rams, lose to the Lions. You beat the Patriots. I think there's a good chance y'all sweep the Patriots. And then you beat the Jets at home. That gives y'all a ceiling of 13 wins. That's me as a Dolphins fan. I hate saying that. Come on, Bills fans. I'm trying to be unbiased. Now, when it came to my projections, I did have y'all winning the division, but I had it at 10-7 because I still feel like there's enough questions when it comes to like the pass rush of this team. Can they stop the run on defense? Offensively, will some of these guys take that jump? The playmakers, it's not exactly like you have a great group, at least when it comes to the receiving core. So I think it's fair that I think some of these, maybe these harder games, you end up taking L's, like against the Chiefs. Chiefs are a tough team. It's a week before your bye. Maybe you lose to the Niners coming out of your bye. I don't think the Colts can be an easy win. Let's even say you beat the Chiefs going into your bye. I don't think the Colts are an easy win, especially on the road. So like, there's losable games here. There truly is. So I think 10-11 wins is fair. Ultimately, I settled on 10. I know that's what y'all were last season. You'd be like, well, we were hurt and we had the OC change. You also had an easier schedule. So I think 10-7 is fair with a harder schedule. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, Bills Mafia, if you want to check out what I had to say about the Dolphins, your division rivals. Haha, check that video out down here. Or if you want to see maybe look to the future of the 2025 NFL draft. I've already been doing my summer scouting, so you can check out some of those videos down here. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.